The morning silence over Kandahar province shattered at 3:47 hours when Captain Zara Nighthawk Voss felt the crosshairs settle on her forehead through the Apache's targeting system. What should have been routine maintenance on the AH-64's modernized target acquisition designation site became something far more sinister when the thermal imagery revealed a figure 2 clicks out, perfectly still, weapon trained not on the aircraft but on her specifically. The Taliban sniper had been waiting, not for any Apache, not for any pilot, for her. Voss had earned her call sign during her third deployment, slipping through enemy airspace like a shadow, striking with precision that left insurgent commanders paranoid and sleepless. But this felt different, personal. The figure in the thermal display remained motionless, patient, as if he knew exactly who was behind that targeting system, as if he'd been studying her patterns, her methods, her soul. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez emerged from beneath the aircraft, hydraulic fluid staining his coveralls. "Ma'am, we've got that pitch linkage sorted. She's ready too." His voice died when he saw her expression through the cockpit glass. Voss had gone pale, her knuckles white against the targeting controls. "Rodriguez." Her voice came out steady despite the ice forming in her veins. "How long have we been out here?" 47 minutes, ma'am. Why?" Through the TADS display, the sniper shifted slightly. A micro-movement that spoke of professional discipline. Whoever he was, he possessed the patience of a predator who'd already selected his prey. The range finder showed 2,847 meters, well within the effective range of a Barrett M82 or similar anti-materiel rifle. Voss had faced death before. She danced with it through the valleys of Afghanistan, played hide and seek with it in the mountains of Iraq. But this felt like an appointment she'd unknowingly made months ago. The sniper's positioning was too perfect, his timing too precise. Someone had provided intelligence about her maintenance schedule, her preferred aircraft, even her personal habits. The thermal signature showed him wearing standard insurgent gear, but his stance betrayed advanced training. This wasn't some farmer with an AK-47. This was a professional, someone who'd studied American tactics, American equipment, and specifically, American pilots named Zara Voss. "Ma'am," Rodriguez's voice carried a note of concern. "Everything all right up there?" The crosshairs in her display began to move. Voss keyed her radio with deliberate calm. "Tower, this is Nighthawk requesting immediate clearance for emergency departure. We have hostile contact at bearing 270, range 2,800 meters." The response crackled back instantly. "Nighthawk Tower, negative on clearance. You're down for maintenance until 600. What's the nature of your emergency?" Through her targeting system, she watched the sniper's rifle begin to elevate. "Tower, I need clearance now. We have a sniper with eyes on our position." "Nighthawk, our perimeter is secure. No hostile activity reported." The rifle completed its arc toward her cockpit. Rodriguez finally looked up, following her gaze toward the distant ridgeline. Even without thermal imaging, his combat-trained eyes caught the unnatural stillness among the rocks. "Oh, shit." Voss's finger hovered over the master arm switch. Standard protocol demanded ground clearance for weapons hot, but standard protocol had never accounted for someone who'd been hunting her across 2 deployments, someone who knew her routine well enough to position himself perfectly during her most vulnerable moment. The sniper's thermal signature showed him settling into final firing position. Time compressed into crystalline clarity. Every decision she'd made over the past 18 months suddenly felt like steps leading to this moment. Every mission, every tactical choice, every time she'd chosen mercy over elimination, had somehow painted a target on her back that led to this morning, this sniper, this impossible shot he was about to take. "Rodriguez, get clear of the aircraft, now." "Ma'am, I'm not leaving you." "That's an order, Sergeant." Through the thermal display, she saw the sniper's breathing rhythm slow, the disciplined preparation of a man about to take the shot of his career. Voss had perhaps 3 seconds to make a choice that would define the rest of her life, or end it. The Apache's 30 cannon system hummed to life beneath her, responding to muscle memory and 18 months of nightmares she'd never told anyone about. Her training screamed protocols and rules of engagement. Her instincts screamed survival. Her heart screamed something else entirely, a recognition that this moment had been inevitable since the day she'd first climbed into an Apache's cockpit. The sniper's rifle steadied against his shoulder. Range, 2,847 meters. Wind, negligible. Target acquired. Captain Zara, Nighthawk. Voss took a breath and prepared to discover which of them had been hunting whom. The morning sun crested the Afghan mountains as two professionals, separated by nearly 3 kilometers of hostile terrain, prepared to settle a debt neither fully understood. Only one would live to see noon. Rodriguez scrambled toward the concrete barriers as Voss's targeting laser painted the distant ridgeline. The sniper's thermal signature pulsed once, a heartbeat caught in infrared, before everything changed forever. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Captain Voss realized why the sniper had waited so long to take his shot. He wasn't hunting her. He was saying goodbye. The recognition hit her like a physical blow, memories flooding back from a night mission 8 months prior. A compound raid. A figure in the darkness who'd had a clear shot at her and hadn't taken it. A pair of eyes in night vision that had looked familiar even through thermal imaging. "My God," she whispered. The sniper lowered his rifle. Voss understood now why this felt personal, why every instinct screamed danger even as every tactical assessment suggested she held the advantage. This wasn't an assassination attempt. This was a reunion. Through her targeting system, she watched the figure rise from his concealed position. His movements carried the fluid precision she remembered from a different war, a different life, when they'd fought on the same side. Lieutenant Marcus Ghost, Chen had been her wing leader during the Syrian campaign. Officially, he died in a helicopter crash 6 months after their unit was disbanded. Unofficially, he'd vanished into the shadows of private military contracting before anyone could ask the right questions about what their unit had really been doing in those final weeks. Now he stood in the open, rifle at his side, looking directly at her Apache through equipment that shouldn't exist in Taliban hands. High-end thermal optics, military-grade communications gear, body armor that belonged in SOCOM warehouses, not insurgent camps. Voss keyed her radio to a frequency she hadn't used in over a year, a frequency that technically didn't exist. "Ghost, this is Nighthawk. Explain yourself." The response came back in a voice she'd heard in her dreams and nightmares for 18 months. "Hello, Zara. We need to talk." Rodriguez crouched behind concrete barriers, his M4 trained toward the ridgeline, confusion written across his face as he tried to understand why his pilot was conversing with a sniper instead of eliminating him. "Ma'am, what are your orders?" Voss stared at the thermal signature of a man who wasn't supposed to exist, holding equipment he shouldn't possess, in a place where his presence violated every assumption about this war. "Stand down, Sergeant. Nobody shoots unless I give the order." "But ma'am." "Stand down." Through her targeting system, she watched Ghost begin moving toward her position, not with the caution of an insurgent approaching enemy aircraft, but with the measured stride of someone walking to a long-overdue appointment. Everything she thought she knew about the past 18 months suddenly felt like carefully constructed fiction. Every mission briefing, every intelligence report, every tactical decision had been made based on information that now seemed suspect. If Ghost was alive, if he was here, if he had access to equipment that suggested connections far beyond what any discharged helicopter pilot should possess, then nothing about her current deployment made sense. "Ghost, stop where you are. We talk from here." The figure paused approximately 1 kilometer from her aircraft, close enough for conversation through encrypted radio, far enough to avoid immediate tactical complications. Zara, you need to get out of Afghanistan, tonight. Explain. Our old unit, Syria, the contracts we ran after official deployment ended. His voice carried weight she remembered, the tone of someone delivering news that would reshape someone's entire world. You were never supposed to survive this deployment. The words hit her like physical blows. Rodriguez looked up from his defensive position, studying her expression for some indication of how to respond to a situation that had already moved far beyond standard operating procedures. Ghost, you're not making sense. The maintenance schedule that brought you out here this morning, your assignment to this particular fob, the intelligence reports that keep sending you into the most dangerous valleys in Kandahar province. Each sentence felt like another piece of a puzzle she'd never realized she was solving. None of it is coincidental. Voss felt the Apache's systems humming around her, suddenly aware that the aircraft itself might be part of whatever trap Ghost was describing. Every mission, every target, every tactical decision of the past 6 months had felt slightly wrong, as if she was being guided toward increasingly dangerous situations. Who wants me dead? The same people who wanted our Syria unit eliminated after we learned too much about the arms deals we were protecting. Through her thermal display, she could see Ghost's equipment in detail now. Russian optics, Chinese communications gear, American body armor, the kind of multinational setup that suggested private military contracting at the highest levels. How many others from our unit are still alive? The pause told her everything she needed to know before he answered. Just us. Rodriguez's voice carried across the tarmac, steady but urgent. Ma'am, I'm showing movement on the perimeter, multiple contacts approaching from the east. Voss switched her targeting system toward Rodriguez's indicated bearing. The thermal display revealed a convoy of vehicles moving toward their position with tactical precision. Not the chaotic advance of insurgent fighters, but the coordinated approach of professional soldiers. Ghost, are those your people? Negative, those are the people who want both of us dead. The convoy consisted of 4 vehicles, each carrying what appeared to be a full tactical team. Military-grade equipment, disciplined movement patterns, and most disturbing of all, they were approaching from the direction of the American base rather than from hostile territory. Ma'am, I count approximately 16 personnel in tactical gear. They're not responding to our radio challenges. Voss realized that she and Ghost had perhaps 5 minutes before being caught in a kill zone, designed by people who understood exactly how both of them operated. Ghost, extraction options. I have a bird inbound, but we need to move now. They've been tracking your maintenance schedule for weeks, waiting for you to be isolated from base support. Rodriguez looked up at her, his training warring with a situation that had moved beyond anything resembled normal military operations. Ma'am, what are your orders? Captain Zara Voss looked at her targeting display, at the approaching convoy of soldiers whose allegiance she couldn't determine, at the thermal signature of a man she'd believed dead who was offering her the only chance of survival, and at a young sergeant whose trust in her leadership was absolute despite circumstances that made no logical sense. Rodriguez, mount up, we're leaving. Ma'am, we don't have clearance for. Sergeant, the people in those vehicles are not here to rescue us. Through her radio, Ghost's voice carried new urgency. Zara, 30 seconds to contact. My extraction bird is 2 minutes out. We can rendezvous at coordinates I'm sending now. The approaching convoy had closed to within half a kilometer. Through her optics, Voss could see individual soldiers deploying from vehicles with the precision of a unit that had rehearsed this exact scenario. Rodriguez sealed the Apache's maintenance panels with practiced speed, his movements betraying the combat experience that had kept him alive through 3 deployments. Whatever questions he had about the tactical situation, his trust in his pilot's judgment overrode everything else. "Ma'am, we're buttoned up and ready to fly." Voss initiated the Apache's startup sequence, muscle memory taking over as her mind processed the implications of everything Ghost had revealed. If he was correct about their Syria unit being systematically eliminated, then every mission she'd flown in Afghanistan had been designed to place her in increasingly lethal situations until something finally killed her. The convoy reached their perimeter. Soldiers began deploying in patterns that suggested they'd studied her specific tactical preferences. They knew how she would try to escape. "Ghost, I'm airborne in 60 seconds. Your extraction better be genuine." "Zara, when have I ever lied to you?" She could think of several instances, but none that had gotten her killed. Through her displays, she watched the soldiers establishing firing positions specifically designed to engage a departing helicopter. Anti-aircraft weapons, guided munitions, equipment that shouldn't exist in a combat zone without extensive coordination with American forces. The Apache's rotors reached operational speed. Rodriguez completed his pre-flight checklist with the efficiency of someone who understood that their lives depended on immediate departure. "Ma'am, I'm showing multiple targeting lasers painting our aircraft." Through her thermal display, Voss could see Ghost beginning to move toward what appeared to be a predetermined extraction point approximately 2 kilometers south of their position. "Nighthawk, this is Tower. You are not cleared for departure. Return to maintenance status immediately." Voss recognized the voice on the radio. It wasn't the controller who'd been handling traffic when they'd arrived. Someone had replaced the tower personnel. "Tower, this is Nighthawk declaring emergency status. We have hostile contacts and are departing immediately." "Nighthawk, negative. Shut down your aircraft and await ground security." Through her optics, she watched soldiers advancing with the coordinated precision of a unit that had trained extensively for this specific scenario. They weren't Taliban. They weren't insurgents. They were professionals whose equipment and tactics suggested American training and funding. Rodriguez's voice carried deadly calm. "Ma'am, I count 8 separate targeting lasers on our aircraft. We need to move now." Captain Voss engaged the Apache's defensive systems and lifted off into a morning sky that suddenly felt more dangerous than any combat zone she'd ever experienced. Behind her, soldiers she couldn't identify opened fire with weapons that shouldn't exist, while ahead of her, a man she'd believed dead offered salvation through means she couldn't verify. The war she thought she'd been fighting was apparently not the war she'd actually been fighting. And the enemy she was running from wore the same uniform she did. The Apache climbed through tracer fire that painted geometric patterns against the dawn sky. Each muzzle flash below represented equipment worth millions of dollars, deployed by personnel with training that cost even more, all focused on eliminating a single helicopter pilot, whose crime was surviving longer than someone had planned. Rodriguez monitored their defensive systems with professional calm despite circumstances that had moved far beyond normal military operations. "Ma'am, I'm detecting radar lock from multiple sources. Someone's coordinating these attacks." Through her communication system, Ghost's voice provided navigation updates toward an extraction point that may or may not represent safety. "Zara, my bird is on station. Vector heading 187, altitude 2,000 feet." Below them, the coordinated ground forces continued engaging with discipline that spoke of extensive training and unlimited funding. These weren't insurgents with captured equipment. These were professionals whose operations budget exceeded that of most small countries. "Ghost, who exactly are you working for these days?" "People who want us alive long enough to testify about Syria." The Apache's threat detection systems screamed warnings as surface-to-air missiles launched from positions surrounding the base. Someone had positioned anti-aircraft assets in a pattern designed specifically to engage departing helicopters. This wasn't a spontaneous response. This was a carefully planned elimination. Rodriguez's voice carried new concern. "Ma'am, I count 6 SAMs inbound. Recommend immediate evasive maneuvers." Voss threw the Apache into a diving turn that pressed both of them against their restraints. Through training and instinct, she began deploying countermeasures while analyzing missile trajectories that suggested her opponents possessed detailed knowledge of Apache defensive capabilities. "They know our equipment too well," she said, more to herself than to Rodriguez. "Ma'am, these missiles are configured specifically to counter our defensive systems." Someone provided detailed technical specifications. Through her radio, Ghost's voice carried new urgency. "Zara, my extraction bird is taking fire. We have perhaps 30 seconds before this becomes impossible." The surface-to-air missiles continued tracking despite her countermeasures, their guidance systems apparently updated with information about Apache defensive capabilities that should have been classified at the highest levels. Rodriguez monitored their defensive systems while maintaining situational awareness that had kept him alive through multiple deployments. "Ma'am, whoever these people are, they've studied our tactics extensively." Through her targeting display, Voss could see Ghost's extraction helicopter, a civilian aircraft with modifications that suggested private military contracting rather than official operations. Around it, muzzle flashes indicated ground fire from multiple sources. "Ghost, your extraction is compromised." "Negative, we can still make this work, but you need to get here now." The Apache's threat detection systems provided constant updates on inbound missiles, each one representing technology and training that shouldn't exist in enemy hands. Someone with access to the highest levels of American military intelligence was providing tactical support to eliminate her. Rodriguez's voice remained steady despite circumstances that challenged every assumption about who they were fighting. "Ma'am, recommend we break contact and find alternative extraction." Through her radio, she could hear weapons fire around Ghost's position. His extraction helicopter was under attack by forces whose equipment and tactics suggested American training. "Ghost, this is a trap." "Negative, Zara, this is a rescue." The distinction might prove irrelevant if neither of them survived the next 5 minutes. Surface-to-air missiles continued tracking despite her evasive maneuvers, while ground fire intensified around Ghost's extraction site. Captain Voss faced a decision that would define whatever remained of her life. Trust a man she'd believed dead, who possessed equipment he shouldn't have, offering extraction through means she couldn't verify, or attempt solo escape through airspace controlled by enemies whose resources and intelligence capabilities had been systematically underestimated. She chose trust over tactics and vectored toward Ghost's coordinates. The extraction helicopter rose from a valley that erupted with muzzle flashes as she approached. Ghost's voice crackled through her radio, with coordinates for rendezvous at an altitude that would place both aircraft within range of the surface-to-air missiles still tracking her Apache. "Zara, match my heading and altitude. We have approximately 15 seconds before this airspace becomes untenable." Rodriguez monitored their approach while tracking multiple threats that continued coordinating against them with precision that suggested extensive planning. "Ma'am, this is the most sophisticated ambush I've ever encountered." Through her targeting display, she could see Ghost's extraction helicopter maintaining position despite ground fire that should have driven off any civilian aircraft. The pilot was either extremely skilled or completely insane, possibly both. "Ghost, your pilot has exceptional credentials." "She should, you trained her." The words hit Voss like physical impact. Through her targeting system, she studied the extraction helicopter's pilot more carefully. The flight patterns, the tactical responses, the precise hovering that maintained position despite hostile fire, all carried signatures she recognized. Lieutenant Sarah Phoenix Martinez had been her wingwoman during the final months of the Syrian deployment. Officially, she transferred to classified operations after their unit disbanded. Unofficially, she'd vanished into the same shadows that had supposedly claimed Ghost. "Phoenix, this is Nighthawk. Confirm your identity." The response came back in a voice she hadn't heard in 18 months. "Hello, Zara. Ready for extraction." Rodriguez looked up at her through the Apache's crew compartment, his expression carrying questions about a situation that had moved far beyond normal military operations. "Ma'am, how many people from your old unit are still alive?" Through her radio, she could hear Phoenix maintaining steady communication with Ghost while maneuvering her extraction helicopter through ground fire that should have been overwhelming for a civilian aircraft. "Apparently more than I thought." The rendezvous required matching Phoenix's altitude while maintaining defensive maneuvers against missiles that continued tracking despite her countermeasures. Someone was providing real-time targeting updates to surface-to-air systems that shouldn't exist in enemy hands. "Phoenix, what's our extraction destination?" "Somewhere the people hunting us can't follow." The Apache drew alongside Phoenix's extraction helicopter at an altitude that placed both aircraft within easy range of the coordinated ground forces below. Through her cockpit glass, Voss could see her former wingwoman's familiar profile despite 18 months of believing she was dead. Rodriguez prepared for tactical extraction while monitoring threats that continued coordinating against them with resources that suggested unlimited funding. "Ma'am, recommend we expedite this extraction." Ghost's voice provided final instructions for a transfer that would require precision flying while under fire from multiple sources. "Zara, Phoenix will maintain position while you and Rodriguez transfer to her aircraft. 60 seconds maximum." The Apache's defensive systems continued screening warnings about inbound missiles, while Voss maneuvered for extraction that required trusting two people she'd believed dead with her life and Rodriguez's life. "Ghost, after we transfer, what happens to our Apache?" "It becomes evidence." She wasn't sure she wanted to know evidence of what, but circumstances had moved beyond the point where standard questions yielded useful answers. Rodriguez prepared for emergency extraction with the professional calm that had kept him alive through multiple deployments. "Ma'am, ready for transfer." Through her targeting display, she could see ground forces repositioning to engage both aircraft during the vulnerable extraction phase. Someone was coordinating these attacks with tactical precision that suggested extensive knowledge of helicopter operations. "Phoenix, we're coming across." The transfer between aircraft took 47 seconds under fire from sources that continued tracking them despite every defensive measure. Rodriguez moved with the efficiency of someone whose survival depended on speed, while Voss completed emergency shutdown of Apache systems that represented millions of dollars in taxpayer equipment. As they lifted away in Phoenix's extraction helicopter, Voss watched her Apache settle onto Afghan soil, where it would presumably provide evidence for investigations she couldn't imagine. "Phoenix, where exactly are we going?" "Somewhere we can finally tell the truth about Syria." The extraction helicopter climbed through airspace that erupted with ground fire from forces whose equipment and coordination suggested resources far beyond what insurgent groups should possess. Through the aircraft's windows, Voss could see her abandoned Apache surrounded by soldiers whose uniforms and tactics suggested American training. Rodriguez secured his equipment while adapting to circumstances that challenged every assumption about who they'd been fighting. "Ma'am, this entire deployment has been designed to eliminate us." Through the crew compartment, she could hear Ghost coordinating with Phoenix for navigation toward a destination he described only as secure. The conversation carried technical details that suggested extensive planning and resources dedicated to this extraction. Ghost, how long have you been planning this rescue? Since the day I learned you were still alive. The words carried implications she wasn't sure she was ready to process. If Ghost and Phoenix had been alive for 18 months while she believed them dead, then everything about her Afghanistan deployment had been based on false information. Phoenix's voice came through the intercom with updates on their route toward whatever destination represented safety. Zara, we need to discuss Syria, everything that happened, everything we learned, everything someone wanted buried. Through the aircraft's windows, she could see Afghanistan passing below, a country where she'd spent 6 months believing she was fighting insurgents, when apparently she'd been the target of an elimination campaign funded by people whose resources exceeded those of most governments. Rodriguez monitored their route while processing information that challenged everything he thought he understood about their deployment. Ma'am, if Ghost and Phoenix are correct, then someone has been using official military channels to coordinate assassination attempts. The implications were staggering. Every mission briefing, every intelligence report, every tactical decision had potentially been designed to place her in increasingly lethal situations until something finally killed her. Phoenix, our destination. International waters. We have people waiting who want to hear our testimony about the arms deals we were protecting in Syria. Through the crew compartment, she could hear Ghost providing tactical updates about pursuit aircraft that were apparently attempting to intercept their extraction. Someone was coordinating a response that included military assets officially dedicated to combating terrorism. Ghost, are we being pursued by American forces? We're being pursued by people who use American equipment to protect interests that aren't necessarily American. The distinction felt important even though she wasn't sure she understood it completely. Rodriguez secured his position for extended flight while adapting to circumstances that had moved far beyond normal military operations. Through Phoenix's navigation updates, she learned their route would carry them across Pakistani airspace toward extraction ships positioned in the Arabian Sea. The coordination required for such operations suggested resources and planning that extended far beyond what any small group should possess. Phoenix, who exactly are you working for these days? People who want the truth about Syria more than they want us dead. The extraction helicopter continued climbing through airspace that might or might not be monitored by forces attempting to prevent their escape. Behind them, Afghanistan represented 6 months of missions designed to eliminate her. Ahead of them, international waters represented the possibility of survival through testimony about events she was only beginning to understand. Rodriguez maintained situational awareness while processing information that challenged every assumption about their deployment. Ma'am, if they wanted you eliminated, why not simply arrange a training accident or equipment failure? Through the crew compartment, she could hear Ghost and Phoenix discussing tactical details of their escape route. The conversation suggested extensive knowledge of military capabilities and limitations that came from training she recognized. Because someone wanted it to look like combat death, heroic, tragic, beyond investigation. The words felt true even as she spoke them. Every dangerous mission, every high-risk target, every tactical situation that had felt slightly wrong suddenly made sense as components of an elaborate assassination disguised as combat operations. Phoenix provided navigation, updates toward extraction coordinates that represented safety through testimony about events that someone had been willing to kill to suppress. The morning sun climbed higher over Asian mountains as 3 supposedly dead American military personnel fled through international airspace toward a rendezvous with people whose investigations had apparently kept them alive. Behind them, the war in Afghanistan continued with one less Apache and several fewer personnel, whose survival had become inconvenient to interests that transcended national boundaries. Ahead of them, the truth about Syria waited to be told.